Hey, it's Antoinette of Montalvo International. I just want to jump on really quickly and share a little bit of revelation that the Lord was just kind of downloading to me. And just as I was thinking about very much, lessons and waiting on his prophetic promises. And I'd kind of been doing a series on that. And I just feel like this adds to that because there are many different specific words that he's been releasing, but just almost like reminders that he is giving along the way as you are waiting for his prophetic promises, or as you are seeking him, as you are advancing forward in his kingdom. There are always lessons along the way, and really throughout our lifetime until we reach heaven, there will be lessons that we will learn. There is never really a point of arriving. It's just growing in maturity and in faith in Jesus. And so he was just kind of downloading some different things as I was taking some time to rest and just thinking about the importance of communing with God, pressing into those moments where you feel like you want to be moving, doing, etc., especially if you maybe just completed a big task, or he just asked you to do something significant. It can be very easy to want to stay on that adrenaline run. But just for me, I've just recognized that my greatest strength comes from being in his presence, especially after major moments of pouring out in some way, shape, or form. Before there may have been old habits of, let me get really busy doing something else, or let me involve myself in someone else's situation, or whatever it is. And this is just me being transparent, but instead just choosing to stop, rest, commune with him, and really press in to him, press into the discomfort of what's the next step, press into the discomfort of being tired after pouring out, pressing into the discomfort of just needing to be present and just enjoying what's right in front of you. And so I say all that to say that all of this kind of goes along with these lessons and waiting on his prophetic promises. Because again, anytime God has you advancing forward in something, there could be a desire to just keep going and going and going and going and pushing through in this kind of adrenaline rush, but recognizing that the more that you mature in him, in his presence is fullness of joy. And you have to stay in his presence to stay filled with his joy, to continue to do whatever he's calling you to do. And so kind of in these lessons that he was talking to me about, there are a couple of different things. The first one that he was just really giving me insight into is just understanding that oftentimes, he will give us what we need, not always what we want. But the thing that we need is actually what we need more than what we think we want. And I'll try to say that again, especially when God is leading you, when he's guiding you, he will often give you what you need. And it may not always be what you want, although it's not to say that there aren't wants that you have that will intersect with your need. But really, he can see beyond what may feel like a convenience need or a convenience want at that moment, and see a deeper need and give you that deeper need, which truly fulfills even the desires that you thought you wanted. Just as a simple example, there was something, my family and we were out, and we had been out, all day, and out of convenience, it seemed like the easiest thing was to, go and grab something to eat at a fast food place and keep it moving. But what I just couldn't land on anything that I really wanted. It was like we were passing this place and that place, and my husband was like, just pick something quick. And it was just like, it just wasn't connecting for me. And I decided, you know what, I would rather just wait on eating something that I know I need versus just eating something out of convenience. And when we got back to the house, what I actually ate was what I both needed. And even if it didn't seem like what I wanted in that moment, because guess what? I was hungry. I was hungry in that moment, but I couldn't land on what I wanted in that moment. And what I really needed was just a nice full meal, not just something quick, not just, something fast food. And sometimes it's like that, even in God's leading, in the lessons and waiting for his prophetic promises. Sometimes we want God to just hurry up, just give me what I want. I'm hungry now. And, we recognize that, who fell into that trap, but nothing other than Esau. With Jacob and Esau had been out and he was doing, hunting and all these different kinds of things. And Jacob was cooking that stew, and Esau thought that what he really wanted in that moment, which was the bowl of stew, was the best thing for him. But it really wasn't. He should have waited on what he what he needed in that moment. He should have waited and not sold his birthright as a result of just what, his flesh was telling him in that moment. And so a lot of times, as you get closer and closer even to breakthrough or the promises that God has set for you, we could very much just start to get in this desperation mode of like, Lord, can't you just give me this thing that I want? Like, I really want it. I'm crying out to you. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm just ready to just make it easy for me. And the thing is that God is very much a perfectionist, and he is going to perfect his good work in you. And so sometimes he's going to have you, learn how to push past those places where it could be more convenient to just give you what you want right now. Again, another example, think about a kid who's hungry and he's like, oh, I just want this thing. I just want an ice cream cone, but they hadn't eaten a full meal yet. Even though, yes, treats are fun and wonderful and God rewards those who diligently seek him. But even in his rewards, he knows that what he wants to give you needs to be more fulfilling. It needs to reach those deep places so that even if you get a treat, even if you get what you want and what you need, he has made sure that you are nourished properly so that you can enjoy the thing you want. Sometimes we won't even be able to enjoy what we want because we haven't been nourished properly with what we need. And so again, as that verse says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. And it's the same way. There's lots of plans in our heart. There's lots of things that we think we want. And even when we say, Lord, I've died to my wants, I've let them go. I only want, what you want. But really, sometimes there's even just little things that we don't recognize, little things that if we could just hold out a little bit longer, God can fulfill those needs and those wants in a way that's nourishing and sustaining to you. And that doesn't leave you with a stomach ache, that doesn't leave you regretting your decision, that doesn't leave you saying, I wish I would have waited just a little bit longer. And again, it's not to say that he's going to leave you high and dry. He's going to leave you famished. He's going to leave you struggling. But there are moments that we have to push past that moment of instant gratification or of convenience or, Lord, I don't feel like waiting any longer, and just say, just wait just a smidge longer so that he can perfect that work in you, that you don't do something regretful like Esau did and sold his entire birthright for a pot of stew, and instead allow God to lead you to what you truly need, knowing that you have picked the thing that God has prepared for you and that it's perfect in its ways. And then all of a sudden, maybe the things that you thought you wanted, you don't really want them anymore. You were just, hungry, or you were just tired, or whatever it is, and allowing God to give you something sustaining and fulfilling. And so again, just understanding that he'll often give you what you need first, not always what you want. And the more that you learn how to, control those appetites, gain that self-control, that fruit of the Spirit, and this doesn't just apply to food, it can apply to anything. It's the easier it gets in understanding, Lord, I see why you want me to have this first. Then, later you can do all the other things. The other kind of key that he was revealing to me is just understanding that, as you prepare and wait for these prophetic promises, your biggest preparation is going to come in the wilderness season. As much as you would like to just be in the promised land and have the thing or do the thing or be in the thing or whatever it is, be in the relationship, the et cetera, your biggest preparation is going to come in that wilderness season where you're longing to arrive at your destination. And I say that because we can see that in so many different examples. For example, with David, he was in the wilderness. He was fleeing from Saul. He was preparing himself. He was out tending to the sheep for quite a long time. And he had to be in that preparation phase to be able to handle all the things that the throne had in store for him. It's the same with Joseph. Joseph, although he had everything kind of handed at his disposal, at his fingertips when he was in his father's house, as he was sold into slavery, and then he had to be in Potiphar's house, and then ended up in jail, and then, was forgotten in jail, and then finally was called by Pharaoh. It was that preparation process that helped him not only stay in humility before, the Lord and before the role and the position he was going into, but it also prepared him for where he needed to go so that he had the right attitude when, the Lord sent his brothers back around to him and realized, I need to not only be fulfilled in myself, but in you guys as well, too. And so in the same way, your biggest preparation point is going to be in that wilderness season. So as hard as it is, do not rush that season, but train in that season, prepare in that season, learn to pray, to fast, to meditate, to when uncomfortable or hard or difficult situations come up, learn how to run to God first and not to people or things or easy comforts or whatever it is, but continuing to keep that momentum with God, then you stay in the right place when you are in greater positions or greater authority or in the promised land or whatever that looks like. And again, we can see this all throughout scripture, again, using David. There was a moment where David was supposed to be in a different place. After all that wilderness training and all the things that he had learned, there was a moment where he didn't stay in the position he was supposed to stay in, even when he was in a comfort place, when no one was necessarily chasing him down, when he was sitting high in the throne, when, everybody was moving according to the way they needed to move, and he had gotten in trouble with Bathsheba. Bathsheba was in her place doing her thing, but David was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, the Lord was just revealing to me is that it's in those places of comfort that it's easiest to let your guard down. When you're in wilderness, you're on guard. You're constantly looking, checking, Lord, what do I need to pray for? Because I got to get to the next step. I got to get through this thing. This thing is hard. I got to push. I got to train. I got to keep going. I got to pray and I got to fast. But when all those barriers are gone and you're able to rest, you're able to exhale, you're able to breathe, you're able to, find the comforts that you need or the desires that you want, or, God has understood that you understand what's a need and what's a want. But then, a little bit of settling comes in there. You have to know how to fight those places of settling off. You have to learn how to fight those places to want to stay comfortable when God says, it's time to go on another assignment or do another thing or present yourself in another way or fast or pray like you used to. And so, again, the better that you prepare in the wilderness season as you're walking towards the promised land, the better you're going to have that reaction to listen to God's voice and be obedient to God's voice when you have what you want and what you need, when you're fulfilled, when it seems like you don't have to scrap as hard, you don't have to push as hard, you don't have to train as hard. But instead, you realize, you know what, God, I want to continue going to you because I want to, I need you more than anything else. And so he was just kind of speaking to me about that in terms of just understanding those needs and those wants. And if you saw a little water dripping down my neck, I just washed my hair. So it's not the living water running down my neck, but it's just regular water because I just washed my hair. Anyway, that's a random aside. But I say that to say, know that God is preparing you. He's pouring his living water over you. He's pouring his oil over you. He's replenishing you even in the wilderness season so that when you have everything at your disposal and you could choose this or that, you can have this or that, you still consult him every step of the way. You still consult him in the easy and the hard things. You still consult him when, you're not trying to run after him to give you the answer. You already have the answer. So it's important to understand, again, that it's in that wilderness season that the preparation that you do now is going to help you be sustained in that promised land, to keep your mindset in the right place and to know that only God can do a thing. And also with all of that, a lot of it is maturity. There may have been things that came to you easier. Maybe you used to fast for one day and the answer came. You used to pray, for 20 minutes and the answer came. You may have been able to cry out and the answer came. But then as you've moved along and you've matured, it seemed like, Lord, I've fasted 21 days. I still don't have the answer. I prayed, all night, every night, and I still don't have the answer. I have done whatever the case. I let go of the people. I let go of this. I secluded myself to be with you. I found myself in your presence and it seems like it's not there yet. And what you have to realize is that when you're training for bigger assignments, when you're climbing higher mountains, it's going to take more than what it was before. And it's not to say that God is about merit-based or performance-based, but there are things, like Jesus said, that only come through fasting and praying. And sometimes you have to be a little bit more prolonged. You have to push in a bit more. You have to press in a bit more. You have to build up that faith muscle a bit more to say, Lord, even if it doesn't look like it's snapping off my fingers like it used to, it's still worth coming after you, running after you, chasing after you, believing in you until I get to that end result. And so just again, recognizing that in this kind of lessons in waiting on God's prophetic promises, in the process, he's building your faith. He's building your momentum. He's causing you to climb higher. There are lots of people who can climb mountains, but not everyone gets to the top of the highest peak. Only those who continue to persevere. And even those who, maybe you got to a really high spot, but you've never been to the peak. Sometimes those who are going to the peak, they don't have a blueprint. They don't have a lot of people to pull from to say, oh, this is how it's done. Sometimes you have to go fully with God. You have to say, Lord, unless you get me there, there's no way to get there. And so God may be leading you up a mountain, climbing you up higher than maybe, you've never been before. Maybe you've never seen anyone else do this thing before. But that's where you have to trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And so if you find yourself pushing hard and saying, Lord, where's the breakthrough? Where's the breakthrough? Where's the breakthrough? You have to realize there may be multiple things he's breaking through for you. There may be a higher mountain than you imagine that he's asking you to climb. There may be a bigger land that he's leading you into. And you have to, again, understand God's needs for you and your wants, and separating out convenience from a true, nourishing, sustaining maturity that he's bringing you into. And then you also have to recognize that your greatest preparation is in that wilderness time. So if you find yourself in a wilderness season, not to push it, force it, rush it. And yeah, it's not to say that it's easy. It is not easy. But the Lord gives you strength. He gives you peace. He gives you perseverance. He gives you endurance. It says, press on, run as those who are training to win the prize. And then also just recognizing that, he's building your faith muscle. He's requiring more of you because, again, to whom much is given, much is required. So there's much that's being given to you. There's much that's being prepared for you. There's much that you're carrying of his glory. There's much that he's leading you into. And so much is required. Much is required. But it's not just for you, as it says in Genesis 50:20, like Joseph said, you intended it for harm, but the Lord intended it for good to save many people alive. So there's going to be many people who are saved because of your testimony, because of your endurance, because of your faith, because of your desire to push aside your wants and listen to what you need according to what God is saying, because you are choosing to allow yourself to be pruned and prepared and press forward in the wilderness season, so that as you get forward into promised land, whatever that is, whether it's marriage or children or job or ministry or whatever it is, that you are prepared for it, and that you don't find yourself like David did, slipping, getting a little bit too comfortable. As kind of a final thought, I remember my father saying to me as I was kind of waiting to be married, and I was just seeking God on what he desired for me. And I knew it was God because it was like a switch was flipped. I was not searching for marriage. I was not one of those people who planned the wedding, got the wedding dress ready. No, none of that. Zero. But it was one particular year that God was saying, Antoinette, start preparing for your wedding, start preparing for marriage. And I, was very flippant about it. And I was like, oh, I'll write some things down on a sticky note and have some ideas. But, little did I know that God was like, no, I really want you to prepare. And even after I got married, and I obviously I prayed, I prepared myself in many different ways, but there were a lot of things, even after I first got married, me and my husband first got married, I would often say to him, it's like, I wish I read more books on marriage. I wish I prepared more. I wish I did this or that more. I wish I prepared on being a wife more. There were so many things that I wish I had done more, but once you're in it, you're going to have to learn while you're in it. And so the more you can prepare ahead of time, the more you can get yourself ready ahead of time, the better your transition, and also just keeping forward in your sustainability, keeping forward and getting rid of some of those lessons that maybe you don't need to learn on the back end, being able to already come in ready. And it's not to say that you can prepare for every little tiny thing, but be diligent about it. Instead of just being so focused on marriage, I gotta get married now. Instead, say, Lord, prepare my heart. Show me books to read. Give me wisdom. Surround me with people that I need to learn from. Help me how to understand being committed to you, Jesus, first and foremost. Help me understand humility. Help me understand respect and honor. Help me understand how to stay committed in my relationship with you, Jesus, so that I can easily stay committed in my relationship and my marriage and not flounder or not get frustrated or whatever it is. And another piece that my father told me, he said, when I was waiting and God had given me this promise and I was saying, where is it? When is it happening? And he said to me, he said, he's preparing your husband just as much as he's preparing you. So you don't want to rush it ahead of time so he can get everything worked out that he needs worked out as well. And that's a piece of that preparation piece. There are people, it's not just marriage. There are people, connections, relationships. And even the Lord is bringing a dream back to my mind where there was one particular person and I was in this dream. I kept saying, Lord, I feel like I wasted time with this person. I did all these different things. And it seems like, they didn't stick around or something happened. And then all of a sudden in the dream, I walked into the kitchen and the person was still there. And in the dream, I said, oh no, I hope they didn't hear me. Oh no, I hope they didn't hear me. And I sat on that dream for a long time. And I was like, Lord, what are you saying in this dream? And oftentimes, and he revealed to me, he's like, the kitchen, you prepare things in the kitchen. And you may not see what's happening in the kitchen. You may feel like the work you did, the things you did, it was just wasted time because you don't see anything happening. But there was even in the dream a specific task that he was giving me in the task to do before I went into the kitchen. And even on a natural level, once I actually came out of that dream and he was giving me revelation, he says, there's certain tasks that I need you to cover first while this person is being prepared. And this is just, this is talking about anything, connections, marriages, jobs, whatever it is, ministry points. He's saying, things are being prepared. People are being prepared. Promises are being prepared. Things are in preparation, but continue to cover what you need to cover first and recognize that, no, your time is not wasted. It's just that preparation is still happening. Preparation is still happening. And that was something that he told me, again, I'm mixing a lot of different stories, but when I was waiting for my husband and waiting for what God had for me in marriage, and again, just preparing myself, he said, I'm preparing him just as much as I'm preparing you. So don't rush the process so that I can complete the work that I need to in him so that you guys can just seamlessly be together. And it was something that, our pastor said on Sunday, you don't want, the world constantly says, two halves make a whole, which they do in mathematical situations. When it comes to people, you want two wholes to make one unit in God. You don't need, one having a half a piece and one having another half a piece and it not, you have all these issues in between, or one having more and the other one not having enough. And it's not to say, again, anyone comes in perfect, but the more that you can bring yourself to a wholeness in Jesus, before marriages, before connections, before jobs, before promotions, before whatever it is, the more that you will stay humble to knowing that only Jesus can keep it going. Only Jesus can keep it going. Only Jesus can keep, your marriage going, your relationships going, your promotion going, the places he's taking you going, your promised land going, house, lands, whatever he's calling you to, whatever it is, ministry, whatever it is, you will constantly keep your eyes on Jesus and not be wandering somewhere else like David did with Bathsheba and cause a whole mess. Thankfully, the Lord was gracious to David, and David had to humble himself and he had to lay his life down, but it left a blemish. It left a mark. And so God is again saying, it's not always what you need. It's not always what you want, but he understands what you need even more than what you want. And sometimes those wants are out of convenience because you feel uncomfortable. But receive what you need so that even when you receive what you want, you can appreciate it and know that it was God that did it. Recognize that even in the process, there's preparation in that process. There's preparation in that wilderness, and do your best to be as prepared as possible so that you can be sustained in the promised land. And then know that it's a faith muscle that's being built. You're climbing higher mountains. You're going further than you've gone before. So you have to have that strength training, that muscle training, that faith training to endure, to continue to move forward in what God is calling you to do, because it's not just going to be about you. We're in a relay race. We got many other people in this race. So you have to continue to build that faith muscle. You have to continue to train. You have to continue to push forward. And then recognizing that it's not only you being prepared, it's whatever the promise is. And it's not to say that God hasn't finished a work before it began, but in our natural world, there are things that are in preparation. There are things and people and circumstances, situations, connections, resources, whatever they are, that are in preparation just as much as you are. And you want want to recognize that God is preparing those things. So do the task that he's asking you to do, even if it's just staying in his presence, leaning into him, keeping up your prayer, your fasting, your endurance before him, so that when you get to that next place, when you are suddenly in the presence of the people or the situations that you've been wanting to be in, that you realize that they are just and fully prepared as you are, so that there's no breaks in the conversation, there's no breaks in the communication, there's no issues that you have to work through, that the time that was needed to work through was done ahead of time. So I hope all of that makes sense for you. These are just some wisdom keys that the Lord was downloading to me and just really encouraging me in as well. And just these lessons and waiting on God's prophetic promises. And just know that he is for you and not against you. And that if you delight yourself in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. So trust in him, delight in him, and he will give you those desires in Jesus' name.